Hello. The manila envelope sat heavy in my hands, its contents burning through the paper like acid. I'd asked Dave from IT to recover Sarah's deleted emails going back 5 years. He'd given me that look, the one that said he knew exactly what I was looking for and pitted me for it. But there it was in black and white. Hundreds of messages between my wife and James Sullivan, her work mentor, from when she first started at Anderson and Brooks Law. The timestamps told their own story. Late-night messages, weekend exchanges, hotel confirmations from the Marriott downtown. But it was one email thread from exactly 12 years ago that made my stomach turn to ice. Right around the time our son Tyler was conceived. "I can't keep lying to Mike," Sarah had written. "He's so excited about the baby. You should see him painting the nursery." James's response came hours later. "We both know what needs to be done. Your marriage was already on the rocks. This is your chance to fix things with him. The baby is a blessing, just not in the way he thinks." My hands shook as I read through their plans, their lies, their cold calculation of using my own child, no, not my child, to save her failing marriage. 12 years I'd spent teaching Tyler to throw a baseball, helping with science projects, kissing scraped knees. 12 years believing I was his father. The front door opened downstairs. Sarah's heels clicked against the hardwood floor. That familiar sound that used to make my heart lift now turned my blood to poison in my veins. "Mike? You home early?" I could hear her climbing the stairs, probably wearing one of her expensive suits from the law firm where she'd made partner last year. The same firm where she'd first met James. Where she still saw him at partners' meetings, probably sharing secret smiles about how they'd fooled everyone. "In the study?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. The emails were spread across my desk like evidence at a crime scene. Which, in a way, they were. She appeared in the doorway, perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect lies. "Hey, I was thinking we could." Her voice trailed off as she saw what I was reading. The color drained from her face. "Funny thing," I said, holding up one particularly damning email. "I always wondered why Tyler's blood type didn't match either of ours. Remember when he needed that transfusion last year? The doctors were so confused. But it all makes sense now, doesn't it?" "Mike, I can explain." Sarah stepped into the room, her hands raised like she was approaching a dangerous animal. Maybe she wasn't wrong. 12 years, Sarah. 12 fucking years of lies. I stood up slowly, watching her take an instinctive step back. "Did you ever love me? Or was I just the reliable backup plan when James wouldn't leave his wife?" Her face hardened then, the mask of contrition falling away to reveal something uglier. "What do you want me to say? That I made a mistake? Fine, I did. But look at our life now, the house, the vacations, Tyler's private school. We built something good. We built something on lies." I corrected her, my voice ice cold. "And now we're going to unbuild it. But first, you're going to tell me everything. Every single detail. And God help you if I catch you in one more lie." Sarah sank into the leather armchair, her perfectly manicured hands twisting in her lap. The facade of the successful attorney was crumbling, revealing the desperate woman beneath. I remained standing, needing the physical advantage as I watched her squirm. "It wasn't planned," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "James and I, it started with late nights at the office. I was struggling with the Carter case, and he offered to mentor me. You were always working such long hours at the construction company. Don't you dare try to blame this on me." I cut her off, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "You made choices, Sarah. Over and over again." She nodded, tears smearing her expensive mascara. "The affair lasted 6 months. When I found out I was pregnant, James, he panicked. Said his wife was already suspicious, that he couldn't risk losing his family, his reputation at the firm. He told me to pass the baby off as yours. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. And you just went along with it? Watched me build the nursery, pick out names, hold him for the first time, all while knowing he wasn't mine. I convinced myself it was better this way." Sarah's voice took on a desperate edge. "James would have been a terrible father. You saw how he treated his other kids, how many times he's cheated on Margaret. Tyler deserved better. He deserved you. Don't pretend this was about Tyler. The words exploded out of me. This was about saving your own skin, your career, your reputation, your comfortable life. Did you ever think about what this would do to him? To me? Of course I did. She stood up suddenly, her own anger flaring. Every single day. Why do you think I worked so hard to be the perfect wife after that? The perfect mother? I was trying to make up for it. I laughed, and the sound was ugly even to my own ears. The perfect wife? Is that what you call fucking James in your office last month? Sarah went very still. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, pulled up the security camera footage Dave had recovered from the firm's system, pressed play, watched her face crumple as she saw herself and James on her desk, 12 years older but still betraying me in exactly the same way. It never really ended, did it? My voice was quiet now, deadly calm. All these years, all these lies about late meetings and work events. You've been sleeping with him this whole time. Mike, please. She reached for me, but I stepped back. It's complicated. James and I, we have history. You have lies. I corrected her. And now you have consequences. I walked to my desk, pulled out another envelope, tossed it at her feet. She picked it up with trembling hands, opened it. Her eyes widened as she read the contents. You can't do this, she whispered. You'll destroy everything.
No, Sarah.
You destroyed everything. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. I smiled and watched her shrink away from whatever she saw in my expression. The board of directors at Anderson and Brooks will be very interested in the proof of how their two star partners have been falsifying billable hours to cover up their afternoon trysts. The Bar Association might have some questions too. They'll fire me, she breathed. I could be disbarred. That's just the beginning, I promised her. I've got 12 years of rage to work through, and I've gotten very creative. But don't worry, I won't do anything to hurt Tyler. Unlike you, I actually love him for who he is, not what he can do for me. The truth of that hit her like a slap. She sank back into the chair, defeated. What do you want? Everything, I said simply. The house. Full custody. Your silence about Tyler's parentage. You're going to give me all of it, or I'm going to burn your entire life to the ground. And then I'm going to do the same to James. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. I moved methodically, like setting up dominoes that would eventually topple Sarah and James's carefully constructed lives. Every morning, I'd make Tyler breakfast, help him with his homework, and act like my world hadn't imploded. The kid didn't deserve to have his life blown up because his mother was a lying snake and his biological father was a coward. Sarah had moved into a hotel, telling Tyler we were working through some adult stuff. She'd signed the divorce papers without protest, giving me everything I demanded. The look in her eyes when she realized I'd already frozen our joint accounts and transferred my assets was almost worth the pain of the past 12 years. Almost. I waited until a Wednesday to execute the next phase. Wednesday was board meeting day at Anderson and Brooks. I timed it perfectly. Sarah and James would be sitting there with their fellow partners, probably trading secret glances, when everything fell apart. The email went out at exactly 9:15 a.m., right as the meeting was starting. A carefully curated selection of their exchanges, along with the security footage, sent to every partner, associate, and secretary in the firm. I included the proof of their billable hours fraud as a particularly nasty cherry on top. My phone started ringing at 9:17. Sarah, hysterical. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:22, James's wife Margaret called. I answered that one. Is it true? Her voice was steady, controlled. I'd always liked Margaret. She deserved better than the piece of shit she'd married. Every word, I confirmed. I have more evidence if you need it for the divorce. A long pause. Send it all. That bastard's not getting a penny. I could hear the chaos unfolding through Sarah's increasingly desperate voicemails. The board had called an emergency session. Ethics complaints were being filed. Their clients were being notified. James had tried to blame everything on her, claiming she'd seduced him. She was begging me to call it off, to tell everyone it was a mistake. But I wasn't done yet. At noon, I had lunch with Tyler at his school. He was chattering about his science project, completely unaware that his world was about to shift. I watched him eat his sandwich, seeing pieces of Sarah in his features that I'd always attributed to my own family's genes. It didn't matter. Biology didn't make a father, love did. And I loved this kid enough to make sure he had at least one parent who wasn't a complete moral failure. "Hey buddy," I said carefully. "How would you feel about missing a few days of school next week? I thought we could take that camping trip we've been talking about." His face lit up. "Really? But Mom said we had to wait until summer." "Mom's going to be really busy with work for a while," I explained, the understatement of the century. "I already cleared it with your teachers." The timing was crucial. We'd be deep in Yellowstone, out of cell range, when the second wave hit. Sarah and James wouldn't be able to reach us when the Bar Association opened their investigations, or when the IRS received an anonymous tip about certain creative accounting practices at the firm. They wouldn't be able to demand my intervention when their other clients started asking uncomfortable questions about exactly how many of their billable hours had been spent on actual legal work versus afternoon delights in Sarah's office. My phone buzzed again, James this time. His message was less desperate than Sarah's, more threatening. He'd destroy me, ruin my business, make sure I never saw Tyler again. I smiled as I read it, knowing what was coming next. He had no idea about the file I'd sent to Margaret's divorce attorney, detailing every penny he'd embezzled from their joint accounts over the years, or about the evidence of insider trading I'd discovered while digging through his email. The SEC would be very interested in that. "Can we get ice cream?" Tyler asked, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked at my son, because that's what he was, regardless of DNA, and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. "Sure, buddy. We can get ice cream." Sarah and James had used a child as a band-aid for their affair, thinking they were so clever, so above consequences. They'd played happy families while building their careers on lies and fraud, never thinking it would all come crashing down. But that's the thing about lies. They have a way of multiplying, spreading, until the foundation they're built on crumbles under their own weight. And I was just getting started. While Tyler and I were setting up our tent in Yellowstone, Sarah's carefully constructed world was burning to ash. I'd arranged for a close friend to keep me updated via satellite phone. "Emergency only," I'd said, in case something happened to Tyler. Each update was more satisfying than the last. The Bar Association had moved with surprising speed. Both Sarah and James were suspended pending investigation, their careers hanging by threads that grew thinner by the day. Anderson and Brooks had placed them on indefinite leave, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Their biggest client, Matthews International, had already withdrawn their business, citing ethical concerns. But it was the personal fallout that truly twisted the knife. Margaret, armed with the evidence I'd provided, had frozen James out of their lives completely. Their 3 teenage children refused to speak to him after learning about his decades of infidelity and financial manipulation. He'd moved into a cramped studio apartment, a far cry from his mansion in Highland Park. "Dad, look!" Tyler called out, pointing to a herd of elk in the distance. I helped him use the binoculars, his excitement momentarily pushing aside thoughts of revenge. We spent the afternoon hiking, and I taught him how to build a campfire. Simple things, real things, untainted by lies. That evening, as Tyler slept peacefully in the tent, I checked the satellite phone. 3 messages from my friend Tom. "Sarah showed up at the house today." The first one read, "Security system worked perfectly, cops were there in minutes. She was screaming about needing to talk to you." The second, "James tried to access the firm's client files remotely. IT caught him. Board's filing criminal charges." The third made me smile. "Margaret's lawyer sent over the preliminary divorce filing. You're going to want to see this when you get back. She's not just taking him to the cleaners. She's taking the whole damn laundromat." I switched off the phone and stared into the dying embers of our fire. Sarah had always underestimated me, seeing only what she wanted to see, the steady, reliable husband who would never suspect her duplicity. She'd forgotten that I'd built my construction company from nothing, that I knew how to plan, how to lay foundations, how to tear down old structures to build something new. The next morning, Tyler was unusually quiet as we made breakfast. "Everything okay, buddy?" I asked, flipping pancakes on our camping stove. He poked at the dirt with a stick. "Tommy at school said his parents got divorced because his dad did something bad. And now he never sees his dad anymore." My heart clenched. "That won't happen to us," I promised. "No matter what happens with Mom and me, you'll always be my son. Nothing can change that." "But what if?" He hesitated, looking so young and vulnerable. "What if you find out something bad about me too?" I abandoned the pancakes and pulled him into a tight hug. "Never going to happen. You're stuck with me, kid. Forever and ever." That evening, I got one final message that made everything worth it. Sarah had been served with papers from the State Bar's Ethics Committee. They were expanding their investigation to include her entire career at Anderson and Brooks. Every case, every client, every billable hour would be scrutinized. Her professional reputation, the thing she'd valued above honesty and family, was being dismantled piece by piece. James hadn't fared any better. The SEC had frozen his assets pending their investigation. His attempt to access client files had triggered a clause in his partnership agreement. He'd forfeited his equity stake in the firm. Decades of wealth and status, gone in a matter of days. As I watched Tyler roasting marshmallows, chattering excitedly about the stars, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Sarah and James had treated lives like commodities, using people as stepping stones to their ambitions. They'd played their game for years, thinking they were untouchable. But they'd forgotten something crucial. The most dangerous opponent isn't the one who strikes first, but the one who waits, watches, and plans. When Tyler and I returned from Yellowstone, the landscape of our lives had shifted like tectonic plates. Sarah was waiting at my office, shadows under her eyes. Her designer clothes wrinkled as if she'd slept in them. Security stopped her from coming up, but I went down to meet her. I owed myself the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart in person. "They're going to disbar me," she whispered, her voice raw. "Everything I worked for, it's all gone. Please, Mike, you have to help me. Tell them it was a mistake, that you were angry and made it all up." I studied her face, the face I'd woken up to for 15 years, the face that had lied to me every single day. "Like you made up our marriage? Like you made up Tyler's paternity?" "Sorry, Sarah, but unlike your lies, my evidence is real. I'll lose everything," she said, desperation making her voice crack. "Now you know how it feels." I turned to leave, but her next words stopped me cold. "I'll tell Tyler everything. About James, about who his real father is. Is that what you want?" I turned back slowly, and whatever she saw in my expression made her take a step back. "Go ahead. Tell him. Tell him how you used him as a pawn in your sick games. Tell him how his biological father didn't want him, how you lied to everyone for years. Tell him how you continued fucking James in your office while pretending to be Mother of the Year. I'm sure that'll work out great for you." Her face crumpled. "You've destroyed my career, my reputation. What more do you want? I want you to live with what you've done. Every day, for the rest of your life, I want you to wake up knowing that your choices, your lies, your selfishness brought you here. And I want you to know that Tyler will grow up with at least one parent who puts him first." I left her there, sobbing in the lobby. My secretary called later to tell me she'd stayed for another hour before security finally escorted her out. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Margaret, James's soon-to-be ex-wife, brought over a box of old photos and documents she'd found while clearing out their house. "I thought you should have these," she said, laying out surveillance photos from years ago. Sarah and James at restaurants, hotels, secret meetings. His private investigator kept everything. James was paranoid about being blackmailed, so he documented all his affairs. Ironic, isn't it? I poured us both a drink while Tyler was at his baseball practice. "How are you holding up?" She smiled grimly. "Better than him. The SEC found evidence of insider trading going back 15 years. He's looking at federal charges now. His lawyer says he'll probably do time." "And Sarah?" The ethics committee found irregularities in almost every major case she handled. They're cooperating with the DA's office now. Something about witness tampering in the Morrison trial. She took a long sip of her drink. You know what the worst part is? He's still trying to blame everyone else. Says Sarah manipulated him, that I drove him to it, that you're just jealous of his success. I thought about Tyler, about how James had walked away from his own son without a second thought. Some men don't deserve the families they have. No, Margaret agreed. They don't. She pulled out one last document from her bag. By the way, you'll want to see this. James's original partnership agreement. There's a morality clause. Once the ethics violations are confirmed, he loses everything, his equity, his pension, even his voting shares. 25 years of being a smug, entitled bastard gone just like that. After she left, I sat alone in my study, looking at the evidence of 12 years of betrayal spread out before me. Sarah had texted again, begging for mercy, offering anything to make it stop. I blocked her number. James had tried a different approach, having his lawyer reach out with vague threats about defamation and harassment. I forwarded the email to the SEC investigator handling his case. They'd be very interested in his attempts to intimidate a witness. The doorbell rang, Tyler's coach dropping him off from practice. I could hear him bounding up the steps, full of energy and innocence, untouched by the savage satisfaction of revenge. Dad, I caught 3 pop flies today. Can we practice more this weekend? I hugged him tight, breathing in the smell of grass and dirt and childhood. Sure, buddy. We can practice as long as you want. Sarah and James had played their game of lies and manipulation, thinking they were above consequences. But they'd forgotten something crucial. Karma doesn't always wait for the next life. Sometimes it arrives wearing a suit, carrying a stack of evidence, and dismantling your world with the same cold precision you used to build it. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos. Bye.